tax freight train is bearing down on your retirement. To protect yourself, you'll have to harness the power of zero.
Hi there, this is David McKnight. Welcome to the Power of Zero show. Grateful that you are taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to learn more about the Power of Zero paradigm. I am the best-selling author of The Power of Zero, Look Before You Lerp, and The Volatility Shield. If you haven't read The Volatility Shield, I've gotten a lot of good feedback. In fact, I've had people read all three books. They like The Volatility Shield the best. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, do so. You can get it on Amazon. And once again, you can get all of our books in bulk discounts at powerofzero.com/books. Also, if you are looking for a Power of Zero advisor, you're looking for someone to help you circumnavigate all the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, head on over to davidmcknight.com and we'll get you hooked up with a qualified Power of Zero advisor. If you are a financial advisor looking to become a qualified or certified Power of Zero advisor, you can go over to powerofzero.com and opt into our free video series. Okay, without any further ado, let's jump into today's topic, which is basically the perils of paying long-term care expenses from your tax-deferred bucket. This could be your 401k, IRA, what have you. They all get treated the same way for tax purposes. So let's say that you are between ages 50 and 65. There's a good chance that you have four. All people that are between 50 and 65, well, not all people, most of them have four of one thing, and that's parents who may be living. And there's a good chance that if you are between 50 and 65, one of those parents is going through a long-term care event. And you may be asking yourself, how am I going to deal with my own long-term care event? I'm looking at my parents or my parent, and I don't like the fact that they may be in a Medicaid-funded long-term care facility. Those, by the way, people in Medicaid-funded long-term care facilities, that's basically for the indigent. If you don't have any money of your own to pay for long-term care, the federal government's going to pick up the tab through Medicaid, but you're not going to get the best of care. You're going to get bare bones, very, very basic type care, and you tend not to live as long in Medicaid-funded, state-funded long-term care facilities. So what I found is that a lot of people between 50 and 65 that I meet at my workshops and our university classes, what we find is that they feel a bit of a false sense of security as to how they are going to be able to finance their long-term care expenses. Most of the time, they think that they're going to just be able to pay for everything out of their IRAs or 401ks. And before we sort of get into whether this is realistic or not, let's talk about the actual cost of long-term care. How long are you going to need long-term care, and what is the average cost of the long-term care? So let's dig into this first. First of all, the average stay in an assisted living facility is just over 2 years. But what the research shows is that before people end up in an assisted living facility, they are typically receiving long-term care, some form of long-term care in their home for anywhere from 3 to 6 months before they end up going to the assisted living facility. And 60% of those who end up going the full 2 years in the assisted living facility end up requiring another 2 years in a nursing home. And after that, they typically do. It's actually anywhere from 9 months to 2 years. So when you add all of these up, you could be in some sort of long-term care type facility or receiving some form of long-term care anywhere from 4 to 5 years. That is a lot longer than most people think because they don't take into account the care that you're receiving on the front end, the care that you're receiving on the back end. A lot of times we have this number in our brain that's 2.3 years or so. That's how long my long-term care stay is actually going to take. It's actually longer than that when you put into the formula and the calculation all of the different types of care that people receive before they die in their waning years. So, how much is this going to cost you? Well, I was teaching a university workshop a couple weeks ago, and we asked people how much, if they had parents that were receiving long-term care, how much they were actually spending on it. And one lady raised her hand and said, my mom is in a long-term care facility and she's paying $14,000 per month. Now, this was in Illinois. We know that long-term care is not the same everywhere you go. There's not a uniform cost of long-term care all across the country. It can be much cheaper in some of the rural settings and much more expensive in some of the urban settings. So that's going to waiver. But what we're going to use for today's numbers are basically $100,000. So $100,000 per year is what you're going to need after tax. And you're going to need it anywhere from 2 to 5 years. But let's focus in on this 4 to 5 year number. Let's for our purposes today, we'll say it's 4 years. You need 4 years of some form of long-term care at $100,000 per year. Now, that is just the cost of long-term care. There's another expense that people don't think about a lot, and that's what I like to call a shock expense. And a shock expense can typically come in the form of an unexpected healthcare cost, or it could be an expected healthcare cost. All of whether it's expected or unexpected, they add up. According to Fidelity, over the typical retirement, you can plan on spending $245,000 just on healthcare expenses that are not covered by Medicare. So that's a pretty big nut. So when you take what it's going to cost you after tax, $245,000 just for healthcare expenses, what it's going to cost you after tax for long-term care, we'll call it $400,000. That's a pretty big nut to crack. Now, we've told you the after-tax numbers. We've got to figure out the pre-tax numbers. In other words, we've got to figure out how much money we have to distribute from our IRA or 401k or other qualified plan to be able to net $100,000 after tax to be able to pay for 1 year of long-term care. Now, the way you do this is relatively easy. I'm sure that most of you know this, but what you'd have to do is you'd have to take your effective tax rate. Now, your effective tax rate is going to be the average. So you average all of the tax rates together. So you're going to pay tax some at 10, some at 12, some at 22. You're probably going to need long-term care, if you're listening to this podcast, at least 20 years in the future, maybe 15 to 20 years in the future if you need it. So these numbers are obviously going to be much higher because we've talked repeatedly on this program about how tax rates in the future will likely be dramatically higher than they are today. Just 6 years from now, that 22 becomes a 25 and the 24 becomes a 28. So we already know that effective tax rate is going to go up. Throw in an effective tax rate. By the way, most state taxes are effective. They don't. There isn't an average. So, for example, if your state tax is 5%, in most states that means it's an effective 5%. So you can just tag that right on top of your effective federal tax rate. So the number I'm going to use for today's math is just 25%. That's your effective tax rate. So what you would have to do is you'd have to take that effective tax rate, take the amount of money you want after tax, and divide it by 1 minus that effective tax rate. So let's say, for example, you need $100,000 net after tax. Your effective tax rate is 0.25. You are going to divide $100,000 by 0.75. Okay, and what you'll find is that you will need to withdraw from your IRA or 401k $133,333.33. If you take that out and pay 25% effective taxes, you're going to net $100,000 after tax. Now, let's put that into perspective. Most of you, if you need long-term care, you're going to be needing it much further down the road. At a period in time when tax rates are likely much higher than they are today. If tax rates were 40%, let's divide 0.6 or divide 100,000 by 0.6. And that gives you $166,666. So that's what you have tax rates. If your effective tax rate went up to 40%, that's how much you would have to distribute from your IRA or 401k to be able to net $100,000 after tax. Now, that assumes that the cost of long-term care doesn't go up. Well, the cost of long-term care is going to go up. And remember, not all inflation is created equal. For example, healthcare expenses and long-term care expenses accelerate faster than the consumer price index. So there's a good chance if you need long-term care 20 years from now, the cost could be more than double what it is today. So now all of a sudden you're saying, okay, I need $100,000 after tax in today's dollars. 20 years from now, that's $200,000 after tax. Tax rates went up to 40%. So instead of having to distribute $166,666 for 1 year of long-term care, I'm going to have to distribute double that, which is closer to, what is that? $325 some odd $1,000. Whatever 166,666 times 2 is, that's going to give you the 335, something like that. So that's a pretty big deal to pay for just 1 year of long-term care. So imagine that. First of all, are you going to have over $1 million sitting in your IRAs and 401ks at age 85? Maybe, but maybe not. You may have. What we find is that people try to spend a lot of their assets during their go-go years. Tom Hegna calls it the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So a lot of the heavy spending in retirement happens in those first 10 years of retirement. So a lot of your assets could be spent down after the first 10 years because that's when you were doing your heavy spending and there's not as much left over for the no-go, slow-go, or the no-go. So we're talking about you needing a massive amount of money if you're planning on paying for long-term care out of your IRA 20 years from now. And remember, a lot of that money, in the case of the 40% tax rates and $100,000 or $200,000 expense, that's $135,000 per year that you're spending just to pay the taxes on your long-term care. So if you have anywhere from $500,000 up to a couple million, this is something that you should really think seriously about. Is it a smart thing to pay for long-term care expenses out of your IRA? And a rising tax rate is absolutely not a smart thing. If you are planning on spending or planning on financing your long-term care out of your IRA or 401k, and you're planning on doing it 20 years from now when the cost of long-term care could be double what it is today, and tax rates could potentially be twice as high then as they are today, you are not likely to have enough money to pay for it. And that's why, of course, through the Power Zero paradigm, we're constantly recommending that people anticipate this, that you preemptively pay those taxes at historically low tax rates, get those dollars repositioned to tax-free. Use an LIRP to pay for the cost of long-term care without all of the heartburn of traditional long-term care expenses. By using an LIRP or a life insurance retirement plan, what happens is that these companies allow you to spend your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. So, for example, if you have let's say you start with a $400,000 death benefit today, over the course of the next 20 years, let's say that grows to $1 million. They're going to allow you to spend up to $250,000 of that million per year every year for 4 years. Now, they may give you a slight discount based on the age in which you receive it, so you may get slightly less than the $250,000 per year. But the point is they're willing to give you your death benefit while you're alive for the purpose of paying for long-term care. So instead of waiting and hoping that you have enough money by the time you're age 80 to 85 and hoping to pay that out of your IRAs or 401ks when tax rates are much higher than they are today, when the cost of long-term care is much higher, why not systematically and preemptively pay taxes on some of these dollars, get them positioned to tax-free vehicles like Roth IRAs, through Roth conversions, Roth 401ks, traditional Roth IRAs, and certainly consider doing an LIRP, because an LIRP is going to give you the benefit of spending that death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. And guess what? You're going to have access to that cash every step of the way. So if you need to supplement your other retirement dollars with some tax-free distributions by way of a tax-free loan out of your LIRP, you certainly have the flexibility of doing that. So my goal in today's podcast is to simply say that we should not necessarily look to our IRAs and our 401ks as the way to pay for long-term care costs. We have to remember that tax rates 20 years from now are going to be much higher than they are today. We have to remember that the cost of long-term care itself 20 years from now is going to be much higher than it is today. And if we can pay taxes preemptively on some of these accounts, get these dollars shifted to Roth IRAs and LIRPs, we're going to be in a much better position to be able to afford to pay for long-term care costs. And I guess my final point is that long-term care is going to be much, if you factor in all the different types of long-term care, whether it's care you receive in your home, an assisted living facility, or finally a nursing home, that's gonna all those things add up. It's going to be a lot longer than you think, and so plan on probably 4 years. And that's not to mention if you have an Alzheimer's event that could drag out for 10 years, like my grandfather. He had Alzheimer's for 10 years. He needed in-home care for 10 full years. So these are real life things. Fortunately, if you are between 50 and 65, you are likely in a position where you can do something about it. You can start a plan that allows you to preemptively pay taxes on these dollars, get them shifted to tax-free in the forms of Roth IRAs and LIRPs, so that you can be in a position to pay for your long-term care needs without the heartburn that all of these, a generation of baby boomers are likely going to feel once they're forced to pay for their long-term care out of their tax-deferred bucket. Remember, Medicaid does not step in until you've spent all of your money down as a married couple to $128,000. They will allow you to keep one house, one car, a minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance of about $2,500 per month. Everything else gets earmarked for the long-term care facility. So if what's left over is in your IRA or 401k, like I said, this is going to be the least efficient way of paying for long-term care. So you can literally burn through $1 million of savings, a lifetime of savings in just a couple of years, because you didn't plan ahead of time and you were forced to pay long-term care expenses out of your tax-deferred bucket. All right, folks, that's the show for today. Once again, if you want to get our books in bulk, that's powerofzerobook.com. If you need a Power of Zero advisor, head on over to davidmcknight.com. If you are looking to transition your practice as a financial advisor to a Power of Zero practice, you can learn more by opting into the video series at powerofzero.com. Once again, we would love if you put some reviews of our books on Amazon. That really helps spread the word, and it helps legitimize the whole concept when we have good, a healthy number of reviews and hopefully mostly 4- and 5-star reviews on Amazon. People really take those numbers seriously on Amazon. So if you haven't had a chance to put some reviews down yet, please do so. And of course, you can always follow me on Twitter at McKnight & Co, at McKnight & Co, C-O. And you can also subscribe. If you subscribe to our podcast, you will get an email alerting you to the arrival of the podcast and even telling you the name of the podcast. Other than that, I appreciate you being on the call appreciate you being on the podcast, and we will look forward to chatting with you same time next week.